The late April sun cast long shadows across Broadway and downtown Nashville, painting the historic buildings in shades of amber and gold. Tourists and locals alike hurried past the honky-tonk bars that lined the famous street, their boots clicking against the worn pavement where countless musicians had chased their dreams. The air smelled of barbecue smoke and the distant promise of rain, thick with humidity that made shirts cling to backs even at 6 in the evening. Inside a modest apartment 3 blocks from the Ryman Auditorium, Reba McEntire stood before a full-length mirror, barely recognizing herself. Gone was the signature red hair, hidden beneath a brunette wig, pulled back into a simple ponytail. She wore faded jeans with honest-to-goodness wear on the knees, a plain grey t-shirt and a navy baseball cap pulled low over Ray-Ban sunglasses. Her hands, usually adorned with rings that caught stage lights, were bare except for her wedding band, which she'd turned inward. "You sure about this?" her manager had asked 3 days ago when she'd pitched the idea. She'd been sitting in her home studio, surrounded by platinum records and awards that suddenly felt like beautiful chains. The 2025 Grammy nomination for Trailblazer should have thrilled her, but instead it had triggered something deeper. A longing to remember why she'd fallen in love with music in the first place, before the stadiums and the spotlights. "I need to know if my music still matters without my name attached to it," she told him. "I need to know if I can still connect." Now, studying her reflection, Reba grabbed the battered acoustic guitar case, a '72 Martin she'd bought at a pawn shop specifically for this experiment. She'd paid cash, wearing sunglasses indoors like some kind of celebrity cliché, but the teenager behind the counter had been too absorbed in his phone to notice or care. The walk to her chosen spot took 12 minutes. She'd scouted it earlier in the week, the corner of Broadway and 4th Avenue, right across from the Bridgestone Arena, where foot traffic flowed heavy but not overwhelming. A stone planter provided a place to sit, and the acoustics she'd tested with her phone carried sound beautifully without being too echo-prone. Reba set up her small portable amplifier, nothing fancy, just enough to be heard over the street noise. She propped open the guitar case, seeded it with a handful of ones and a 5 to show people it was okay to tip, and checked the tuning one last time. Her fingers trembled slightly, and she smiled at the absurdity of it. She'd performed for presidents and sold out stadiums, but sitting on this street corner felt more terrifying than any stage she'd ever commanded. At 6:47 p.m., Reba McEntire began to play. The opening chords of Fancy drifted into the early evening air, her voice strong but stripped of the production polish that came with studio recording. People passed, some glanced, most didn't. A middle-aged couple dropped $1 in her case without breaking stride. 3 college-age kids recording everything on their phones walked by, laughing about something completely unrelated to her music. She'd expected this, but it still stung in ways she hadn't anticipated. 40 minutes into her set, as the sun dipped lower and the neon signs began to glow brighter, 3 people stopped. The first was a woman in her late 20s wearing navy blue scrubs with cartoon stethoscopes printed on them. Her blonde hair was pulled back in a messy bun, strands escaping around a face marked by exhaustion deeper than one long shift could explain. She stopped about 15 feet away, head tilted, as Reba transitioned into "Consider Me Gone." The woman's hand went to her throat, fingers pressing against her collarbone, like she was trying to hold something in. Rebecca Taylor had been walking for hours. She'd left Presbyterian Hospital at 2 p.m. after the meeting with HR. The polite, clinical conversation that had ended with, "We're eliminating your position due to budget restructuring." 5 years of nursing, of double shifts and emotional exhaustion, of holding hands with dying patients and celebrating with new parents, reduced to a severance package and a cardboard box of personal items now sitting in her car's trunk. The music stopped her because the lyrics felt like someone had reached into her chest and pulled out her own thoughts. "I'll be fine once I find that life I left behind." She'd been so sure nursing was her calling, but lately every shift had felt like drowning. And now the decision had been made for her, and she didn't know if what she felt was grief or relief, or some terrible combination of both. The second person who stopped was a man in his early 40s with military short hair going grey at the temples. Daniel Foster wore jeans and a faded Army veteran's t-shirt, his posture too straight, his eyes scanning the crowd with the systematic assessment of someone who couldn't turn off training. He'd been heading to his weekly therapy appointment at the VA clinic on 8th Avenue when the music caught him. It wasn't the lyrics that stopped Daniel, it was the pure sound of it. Something about the guitar's resonance hit a frequency that quieted the constant static in his head, the anxiety that had followed him home from Kandahar like a second shadow. For the first time in 3 days, the phantom sounds of helicopter rotors faded. He stood there, hands shoved deep in his pockets, shoulders slowly dropping from their defensive hunch. The third person was barely past childhood, though she'd have argued furiously against that description. Evelyn Mitchell was 17, with her mother's dark curls and her father's stubborn jaw. She wore a backpack covered in pins from bands her parents had never heard of, and she'd been heading home from her after-school job at the Barnes & Noble on West End Avenue, dreading the conversation waiting for her. That morning, she'd told her parents she wanted to defer college to pursue music. Her father, a tax attorney who measured success in billable hours and retirement accounts, had responded with the kind of disappointed silence that hurt worse than yelling. Her mother had cried. The compromise, she could go to Vanderbilt for pre-law and do music as a hobby, sat in her stomach like broken glass. But this woman on the corner, this anonymous street musician with the worn guitar and the powerful voice, was doing it, living it. Evelyn moved closer, studying the way the woman's fingers moved across the frets, how she controlled her breathing between phrases, how she performed like the dozen people passing without looking were a sold-out crowd. Reba noticed all 3 of them. In 2 decades of performing, she'd learned to read audiences, to spot the people who weren't just listening, but hearing. She finished "Consider Me Gone" and launched into "I'm a Survivor." Watching how the blonde woman in scrubs straightened her spine during the chorus, how the veteran's jaw unclenched slightly, how the teenage girl moved her lips along with words she clearly knew by heart. When that song ended, Reba spoke for the first time. "Appreciate y'all stopping. Not many folks take time to listen anymore." Her voice was pure Oklahoma, the accent she'd never lost despite decades in Tennessee and California. "You're really good," Evelyn blurted, then blushed at her own enthusiasm, like, "Really good. Are you signed with anyone?" Reba smiled, adjusting her sunglasses, even though the sun had nearly set. "Just playing for the love of it these days, honey. You a musician?" "Trying to be. My parents think I'm crazy." The words spilled out before Evelyn could stop them, propelled by the relief of talking to someone who might understand. "Most parents do," Reba said, launching into a soft chord progression. "Most parents want safety for their kids. Music's about as safe as juggling chainsaws while riding a unicycle. But some folks can't be happy doing anything else." Rebecca surprised herself by laughing, the first genuine sound she'd made in hours. "That's truth. I thought I knew what I wanted, but—" She trailed off, realizing she was sharing with a complete stranger. "But life's got a way of changing the script on us," Reba finished, nodding. She looked at Daniel, who hadn't spoken but whose attention was absolute. "Music's good for that, though. Helps us process when words aren't enough." "You all right there, son?" Daniel tensed at being directly addressed, but something in the woman's tone, no pity, no pushy concern, just acknowledgement, made him nod. "Yeah. The music's nice, quiet in a loud way, if that makes sense." "Makes perfect sense," Reba said, and played a few bars of something instrumental and gentle, watching his shoulders drop another inch. Sometimes we need sound to drown out the noise in our heads. A group of bachelorette party tourists swept past, one of them dropping a $10 bill in the guitar case with a tipsy, "You're amazing," and before being pulled along by her friends toward the next bar. The moment broke slightly, reality intruding on the small bubble that had formed around the four of them. "You going to be here tomorrow?" Evelyn asked, surprising herself with the question. She had homework and a shift at the bookstore, but something about this felt important in a way she couldn't articulate. Reba considered it. She'd planned on just tonight, but looking at these three faces, each carrying something heavy, each having stopped to let music lighten the load even for a moment, she made a decision. Same time tomorrow, if the weather holds. No promises beyond that. Rebecca checked her phone reflexively, though she had nowhere to be. The empty evening stretched ahead of her, the first of many, now that her work schedule no longer defined her days. "I might stop by," she said, casual enough to be non-committal, certain enough that Reba smiled. "I'll be here," Daniel said quietly, then looked almost startled that he'd spoken. He'd stopped making plans, stopped committing to anything beyond the next hour. But this felt manageable. This felt safe. "Well, all right then," Reba said, launching into Fancy Again, the song that had drawn them in. She played for another hour, but the three drifted away individually. Rebecca first, walking back toward her car with slightly less weight in her steps. Then Daniel, checking his watch and realizing he'd missed his therapy appointment, but feeling oddly fine about it. Finally, Evelyn, who had to catch the bus before the routes changed. At 9 p.m., Reba packed up. She'd made $147 in tips, every dollar a small validation that the music could still reach people. But more than the money, she thought about those three faces, about Rebecca's laugh, about Daniel's shoulders dropping, about Evelyn's hungry attention to every chord change. Walking back to her apartment, the wig itching slightly and her fingers pleasantly sore from playing, Reba felt something she hadn't experienced in years. The simple satisfaction of music shared without expectation, without spectacle, without the machinery of fame grinding everything into product. She'd be back tomorrow. Not just because she'd said she would, but because she needed to see what happened next. For them, yes, but also for herself. The weather didn't hold. At 5:30 p.m. the next day, the sky over Nashville had darkened to bruised purple, and thunder rumbled in the distance like a giant clearing its throat. The humidity had climbed to suffocating levels, the kind of thick air that made breathing feel like work and turned every breeze into a temporary miracle. Reba almost didn't go. She stood in her apartment, watching the weather forecast on her phone warn of severe thunderstorms moving through Davidson County between 7 and 9 p.m. The sensible thing would be to skip tonight, wait for better conditions, but she'd told them she'd be there. She dressed in the same disguise, different shirt, same wig, same sunglasses, and headed out at 6:15 p.m., giving herself extra time in case she needed to seek shelter quickly. The streets were less crowded than yesterday, tourists heeding the weather warnings and locals ducking into restaurants and bars before the storm hit. Reba set up in her spot at 6:35 p.m., the wind already picking up enough to ruffle the bills in her guitar case. She anchored them with her car keys and began to play, starting with "The Night the Lights Went Out in Georgia," because it felt fitting for the evening's atmosphere. Rebecca arrived at 6:42 p.m., wearing civilian clothes now. Yoga pants and a faded Vanderbilt t-shirt that dated back to her undergrad days. She carried a reusable water bottle and wore an expression less shell-shocked than yesterday, but no less lost. "You actually came," she said, stopping in front of Reba with something like relief crossing her face. "I wasn't sure if you would, with the weather." "Said I would," Reba replied between verses. "Besides, best time to play is when everyone else has the good sense to stay indoors. Less competition." She winked, and Rebecca found herself smiling again. "I brought you this," Rebecca said, pulling a protein bar from her pocket. "I don't know if you eat dinner before you play, or if you're out here because you need the money or what. But I worked enough 12-hour shifts to know that sometimes you forget to eat." The gesture touched Reba more than it should have. "That's real kind of you. Thank you." She accepted the bar, setting it on top of her amplifier. "You have a good day today?" Rebecca's smile flickered. "Spent 4 hours on job search websites. Turns out there's about 100 applicants for every decent nursing position in Nashville. I've got savings for maybe 3 months if I'm careful, so no pressure or anything." "But you're not sure you want another nursing job," Reba observed, her fingers still moving through the chord progression. "How did you—" Rebecca started, then laughed shortly. "That obvious, huh? 5 years of school and 5 years of work, and I don't know anymore if I chose it or if it chose me. My mom was a nurse. Her mom was a nurse. It felt like destiny or whatever. But lately, every shift felt like drowning in other people's trauma, and I couldn't figure out if that meant I was failing or if I was just done." "Maybe both," Reba said gently. "Maybe neither. Maybe it just means you're human, and you need to figure out what Rebecca wants, not what Nurse Rebecca is supposed to want." Before Rebecca could respond, Daniel appeared, walking faster than usual, glancing over his shoulder at the darkening sky. He wore the same jeans as yesterday, but a different t-shirt, this one plain black, and he carried a tension in his jaw that suggested the day hadn't been kind. "Storm's coming," he said by way of greeting, stopping at the edge of their small group. "Probably got 30 minutes before it hits," Reba agreed, transitioning into something softer, more contemplative. "You make your appointment today?" Daniel blinked, surprised she'd remembered. "Yeah. Wasn't as useful as yesterday, actually. Doc wants to adjust my medication again, 3rd time in 5 months." "That working for you?" Rebecca asked, her nurse instincts surfacing despite her current existential crisis. "Nothing's working for me," Daniel said, more bitter than he'd intended. He closed his eyes briefly. "Sorry. It's been a day. I came because yesterday this was the first place in months where my brain shut up for a while." "Don't apologize," Rebecca said firmly. "Trust me, I understand that feeling." Reba watched them, these two broken people finding unexpected commonality, and adjusted her playing to give them space to talk while still maintaining the musical backdrop. This was why she'd come back, she realized. Not for herself, but for moments like this, when music created a safe space for people to be honestly human with each other. Evelyn arrived at 7:03 p.m., running the last half block as the first fat raindrops began to fall. Her backpack bounced against her shoulders, and her dark curls had frizzed in the humidity into a wild halo around her face. "Made it!" she gasped, breathing hard. "Mom tried to make me stay home because of the weather, but I told her I was studying at Natalie's house." She looked immediately guilty. "I don't usually lie to my parents, but after yesterday's fight, I couldn't deal with another conversation about realistic career paths and not throwing away opportunities." Thunder cracked overhead, close enough that they all flinched. The rain intensified from scattered drops to a legitimate shower in seconds, the kind of sudden downpour that Nashville did best. "All right, we're relocating," Reba announced, rapidly packing her guitar. "There's an overhang about half a block down, in front of that closed restaurant. Move!" They scrambled, Reba grabbing her guitar case and amp, while Daniel instinctively grabbed the folding stool she'd been sitting on. They huddled under the awning of what used to be a cafe, the space narrow but sufficient to keep them dry. The rain became a curtain of water, turning Broadway into a glistening river of reflected neon. "Well, this is cozy," Rebecca said, wringing water from her ponytail. They were pressed close together, the four of them barely fitting in the sheltered space, close enough that they couldn't avoid really looking at each other. "I love thunderstorms," Evelyn said, watching the lightning flash over the buildings. Mom always hated that I'd go sit on the porch during storms when I was little. She thought I was going to get struck by lightning out of sheer stubbornness. Mothers worry, Reba said, pulling out her guitar again. The amplifier was useless now. She'd turned it off the moment the rain started, but acoustic could work. It's their job description. Doesn't mean they're always right about what to worry about, but they're going to worry regardless. Is that what you tell yourself? Evelyn challenged, teenage defiance flaring. When people tell you that street performing is wasting your talent, that you should give up and get a real job? Reba's fingers stilled on the strings. In the shadows under the awning, with her sunglasses in her pocket and the wig slightly askew from the rain, she looked more real than she had the previous day. I tell myself that talent without joy is just labor, and there's plenty of real jobs that'll kill your soul just as dead as giving up on your dreams. The trick is figuring out which risk you can live with. That's easy to say when you're older, Evelyn muttered, when you've already made your choices. Who says the choosing ever stops? Daniel interjected quietly. Everyone turned to look at him. He shifted uncomfortably but continued. I'm 42. I served 20 years in the army. I did everything right, followed every rule, and I came home and found out that the person who left doesn't exist anymore. Now, I'm supposed to figure out who the hell Daniel Foster is when he's not Sergeant Foster. So yeah, kid, the choosing doesn't stop just because you get older. It gets harder, actually, because you've got more history to untangle. The silence that followed was broken only by the drumming rain. Evelyn looked chastened, Rebecca thoughtful, and Reba heartbroken by the rawness in Daniel's voice. Thank you for sharing that, Reba said softly. Takes courage. Daniel shrugged, jaw tight. Therapist says I need to practice talking about it. Keeping it locked down isn't working. Your therapist is right, Rebecca said. I've seen it from the medical side. PTSD isn't something you can just discipline away, no matter what the old-school military guys want to believe. You work with veterans? Daniel asked, latching onto something that felt safer than his own confession. I worked in the ER, Rebecca corrected, past tense as of yesterday. But we saw a lot of vets, not enough resources, too many barriers to care, and a culture that treats mental health like weakness. It was... She trailed off, struggling for words. It was part of why every shift felt like drowning. Secondary trauma, Daniel said, recognition flickering across his face. My therapist talked about that, how caretakers absorb the trauma of the people they help. Exactly. Rebecca looked at him with real understanding. And I felt guilty for being tired of it, because at least I could go home at the end of my shift. The people I was treating lived with it. But you can't help anyone if you've got nothing left to give, Reba said, playing a few gentle chords. That's not selfishness. That's survival. Evelyn had been quiet, processing this exchange between people dealing with problems that made her college versus music dilemma seem trivial. But when she spoke, her voice was thoughtful rather than defensive. I think I'm afraid of ending up where you two are. Not specifically, but making a choice and then finding out years later that it was wrong. That I wasted time. All time is wasted if you measure it by outcomes, Reba said. Rebecca didn't waste 5 years being a nurse just because she needs to step back now. Daniel didn't waste 20 years serving just because he's struggling with the aftermath. We're all just doing the best we can with the information we have. The storm continued to rage, lightning illuminating Broadway in stark flashes, but under the awning, something else was building. A fragile connection between 4 people who, by all logic, shouldn't have found themselves in this moment together. Can I ask you something? Rebecca said, looking at Reba with sudden intensity. Why are you really out here? And don't say it's just for the love of music. There's something else. Reba's hands stilled completely. For a long moment, she considered deflecting, maintaining the comfortable anonymity. But these people had been honest with her. They deserved honesty in return, as much as she could give without revealing everything. "I needed to remember why I started," she said finally. "I've been doing music for a long time. Long enough that sometimes it stops feeling like music and starts feeling like obligation, performance, product. I wanted to strip it back down to the simplest form. Me, a guitar, and people who might listen if the song's good enough. No safety net, no reputation preceding me, just the music." "And?" Daniel prompted. "And yesterday, watching you three stop and really listen, it mattered more than 1,000 other shows I could mention, because you didn't have to be there. You chose to be." Reba smiled, real warmth in it. "So, I chose to come back." The rain began to ease around 7:45 p.m., the storm moving through as quickly as it had arrived. The group emerged from their shelter, clothes damp and hair disheveled, but something had shifted. They weren't strangers anymore, not quite. "I should get home," Evelyn said reluctantly. "My mom will actually call Natalie's house if I'm not back by 9. "I've got an early morning phone interview with a hospital in Franklin," Rebecca added. "Though after today, I'm not sure what I'm going to say when they ask why I left my last position." "Tell them you're looking for an environment that better supports work-life balance," Daniel suggested. "That's corporate speak for my last job was destroying me." Rebecca laughed. "That's actually helpful, thanks." "Same time tomorrow?" Evelyn asked Reba, hope evident in her voice. "If you're still doing this?" Reba looked at each of them, this unlikely trio that had become the unexpected center of her experiment. "Yeah," she said. "I'll be here." As they dispersed into the rain-washed evening, Reba packed up her gear more slowly than necessary, watching them go. Rebecca and Daniel walked together for a block, talking about VA resources. Evelyn headed to the bus stop, her phone already out, likely texting her ride. Tomorrow, Reba thought, she'd play the songs that scared her, the new ones she'd written but never performed, the ones that felt too personal. If this experiment was about authenticity, she needed to practice what she preached. Friday evening arrived with perfect weather, as if the previous night's storm had scrubbed the air clean. The temperature hovered at a comfortable 72 degrees, and a light breeze kept the humidity bearable. Broadway was packed with tourists and locals celebrating the start of the weekend, the honky-tonks already throbbing with music and energy. Reba arrived at 6:20 p.m., earlier than the previous 2 days, and found Daniel already waiting. He sat on the planter where she usually set up, hands clasped between his knees, staring at nothing in particular. "Hey," she said, setting down her guitar case. "You're early." Daniel looked up, startled from whatever thoughts had consumed him. "Yeah. I wasn't sure what else to do with myself tonight. My buddy invited me to meet up at a bar, but crowds and alcohol aren't a great combination for me right now. Figured this was safer." "Well, I appreciate the company," Reba said, pulling out her guitar and beginning her setup routine. "You mind if I ask you something personal?" Daniel tensed but nodded. "Go ahead." "What did you do in the army, if you don't mind talking about it?" "I was a combat medic," Daniel said after a pause. 3 tours in Afghanistan. I patched up soldiers in the field, tried to keep them alive long enough to get to real doctors. Sometimes it worked, sometimes it didn't. "That's why you and Rebecca connected," Reba observed. "You've both spent years trying to save people." "And we both burned out," Daniel agreed, "though at least she gets to start over without people calling her a hero. That's the worst part. Everyone wants to thank you for your service, but nobody wants to deal with the fact that service broke something that doesn't fix easy." Reba tuned her guitar, giving him space to continue or stop as he needed. "Yesterday my therapist asked me what I wanted," Daniel continued. "Not what I thought I should want, but what I actually wanted. And I realized I didn't know. For 20 years, the army told me what to want. Now I'm supposed to figure it out myself, and I don't even know where to start." "What made you feel alive over there?" Reba asked. Besides survival, what moments made you feel like yourself? Daniel considered this. The quiet ones. When we'd been in the field for days, and we'd get a moment where nothing was happening. Some guys would sleep. I'd find somewhere to sit and just listen to the wind or birds if there were any, or sometimes one of the guys would have a harmonica or something. Those moments felt real in a way the rest didn't. Sounds like you need more quiet, Reba said. Less chaos. Sounds boring, Daniel countered, but without heat. Boring's underrated, Reba said, launching into a gentle finger-picking pattern. Most of life happens in the boring parts. The exciting parts just make better stories. Rebecca arrived at 6:50 p.m., wearing a sundress, her hair down for the first time, makeup carefully applied. She looked simultaneously more polished and more vulnerable than the previous 2 days. Interview? Reba guessed. How did you know? Rebecca asked, then gestured at herself. Right, the clothes. Yeah, I had one this afternoon at Presbyterian Hospital. Different department, same building where I used to work. It was surreal. How'd it go? Daniel asked. Rebecca's expression crumpled slightly before she pulled it back together. They offered me the position. Same pay, better hours, less ER trauma. It's everything I thought I wanted when I started job hunting. But, Reba prompted, but sitting in that interview, answering questions about my nursing philosophy and my greatest strengths and where I see myself in 5 years, I felt like I was lying. Not because I said anything untrue, but because the person they were interviewing, Nurse Rebecca, competent and caring and committed, I don't know if that's who I am anymore. She sat down heavily on the planter next to Daniel. I told them I needed a few days to consider the offer. They looked confused because apparently everyone wants this position, and I walked out and sat in my car for an hour trying to figure out why I wasn't happy. Because you're grieving, Daniel said quietly, not for the job you lost, but for the person you thought you were. Rebecca looked at him with startled recognition. Yes, exactly that. Evelyn burst into the moment with the unconscious energy of youth, dropping her backpack and announcing, I told them. All three looked at her expectantly. I told my parents that I'm deferring college for a year to pursue music. Actually told them, didn't hint or argue or negotiate, just said, I'm 18 in 3 months and this is what I'm doing. She looked equal parts terrified and exhilarated. My dad hasn't spoken to me since breakfast. My mom keeps crying. It's a disaster. But you did it, Reba said, something like pride in her voice. I did it, Evelyn confirmed. Then her bravado cracked slightly. I did it and now I'm terrified because I have no idea what comes next. Like, okay, I'm pursuing music, doing what exactly? Playing coffee shops, posting covers on YouTube, busking on Broadway? She gestured at Reba. No offense. None taken, Reba assured her. And all of those are legitimate paths, but you need to figure out what kind of musician you want to be. Singer-songwriter, session player, cover artist, original material, country, pop, rock, folk? I don't know, Evelyn admitted, frustration evident. I just know I'm good and I love it, and the thought of not doing it made me feel like I was suffocating. That's enough to start with, Reba said. The rest you figure out by doing. You write songs? Some. They're not great. They're probably better than you think, and worse than they could be, Reba said pragmatically. That's how it works when you're starting. You keep writing until the gap between your taste and your skill starts closing, and you perform every chance you get, because stage time is the only way to learn how to be on stage. Will you listen to one? Evelyn asked suddenly. One of my songs. I brought my guitar today, just in case. She pulled a battered acoustic from her backpack case, somehow having carried both without anyone noticing. Reba glanced at Rebecca and Daniel, whose presence made this a de facto audience. You comfortable performing in front of people? No, Evelyn said honestly, but I need to get comfortable, right? Fair enough. Let's hear it. Evelyn took a shaky breath and began to play. Her fingers were technically proficient but nervous, and her voice wavered on the first line before steadying. The song was about feeling trapped in other people's expectations. The lyrics a bit too on the nose, but the emotion behind them genuine and raw. When she finished, the silence stretched for several seconds. Evelyn looked like she might be sick. "That was brave," Rebecca said first. "Seriously brave. Your chord progression is solid, and your voice has real quality," Reba said, making mental notes. "The lyrics are telling instead of showing. You're stating emotions instead of painting pictures that create emotions. But that's craft, and craft can be learned. The core of it, the honesty, that's there. That's the part you can't teach." Evelyn's eyes had gone bright with unshed tears. "Really, you've got something, honey. It needs work, but it's there." "See, now I'm feeling inadequate," Rebecca joked, but there was something underneath it. "You're figuring out your calling at 17. Daniel's got 20 years of service. Even you," she gestured at Reba, "however long you've been playing, you're clearly talented and committed. And I'm 27 with a degree I don't want to use and no idea what else I'm qualified for." "You're qualified to care about people," Daniel said. "That's not nothing. That's actually pretty rare." "Caring about people doesn't pay bills," Rebecca countered. "Neither does music most of the time," Evelyn interjected. "My dad made sure to give me statistics about average musician income. It's depressing." "So we're all choosing passion over practicality," Daniel observed, "or trying to figure out how to choose it. That's what this is, right?" Reba set her guitar aside and looked at each of them in turn. "You want to know what I think? I think practical is a trap we use to talk ourselves out of risks. Don't get me wrong, you need to eat and keep a roof overhead. But there's a difference between being practical and being scared. Practical Rebecca takes a nursing job that doesn't destroy her while she figures out what else she might want to do. Scared Rebecca takes a nursing job she doesn't want because she can't imagine any other options." She turned to Evelyn. Practical Evelyn defers college for a year to seriously pursue music while she's young enough to afford the risk. Scared Evelyn goes to Vanderbilt, never seriously tries, and spends the rest of her life wondering what if. Finally, she looked at Daniel. Practical Daniel gives himself permission to heal and explores what life looks like without the structure he's known for 20 years. Scared Daniel keeps pushing through because stopping feels like failure. "And what about practical you?" Daniel challenged. "You're out here playing street corners when you're clearly skilled enough for better. What are you running from or toward?" Reba froze. It was the most direct challenge anyone had issued, and it cut right to the heart of her own confusion. "I'm trying to figure out if the music matters more than the machinery around it," she said slowly. "I'm trying to figure out if I'm a musician who became a product, or if there's still something authentic left." The moment hung there, heavy with shared vulnerability, until a group of drunk tourists stumbled past, one of them shouting, "Play Wagon Wheel!" and destroying the intimacy. Reba obliged, launching into the requested song, and the moment shifted into something lighter. Evelyn joined in on her guitar, harmonizing tentatively at first, then with growing confidence. Rebecca and Daniel provided clapping rhythm, laughing when they lost the beat. For the next hour, they played and talked, the music creating a bubble around them that insulated them from the Broadway chaos. Other people stopped to listen and dropped money in Reba's case, but the four of them barely noticed, caught up in their own world. At 9 p.m., as Reba was packing up, Rebecca made a decision. "I'm going to turn down the job," she announced. "Not because it's wrong, but because it's not right enough. I'll find something part-time to cover expenses while I figure out what Rebecca actually wants." "That's terrifying," Evelyn said. "Yeah," Rebecca agreed, "but I've spent 5 years doing the sensible thing and ended up burned out and lost. Maybe it's time to try something different." "I'm proud of you," Daniel said quietly, "for what it's worth." "It's worth a lot," Rebecca assured him. What about you? What's your next move? Daniel was quiet for a long moment. I think I need to leave Nashville for a while. I've got a buddy in Montana with a ranch. He's been asking me to come visit, help out with some work. I keep saying no because it feels like running away. But maybe it's running towards something. Quiet, space, time to figure shit out without everyone in my life having opinions about it. Montana sounds amazing, Evelyn said wistfully. Meanwhile, I'm going to be here fighting with my parents and trying to book gigs at coffee shops. You need to showcase, Reba said. Build a repertoire of both covers and originals and set up a showcase, a proper 1-hour set at a small venue. Invite everyone you know. Record it. That becomes your proof of concept, the thing you show people when you're trying to book better gigs. How do I book a venue when nobody knows who I am? Evelyn asked. Start smaller. Open mics, writers' rounds, build from there. I can give you a list of places that are friendly to new artists. You'd do that? Why not? You've got talent and you're willing to work. That's all any of us had when we started. They parted ways with plans to meet again tomorrow, Saturday, which would be Reba's last day, though she hadn't told them that yet. Her manager had been surprisingly supportive of the experiment, but had drawn the line at an entire week. She had actual commitments resuming Monday. Walking home, Reba thought about Daniel's question. What was she running from or toward? She'd started this experiment thinking it was about the music, about reconnecting with why she'd fallen in love with performing. But somewhere in the last 3 days, it had become about these 3 people and their struggles, real problems that had nothing to do with fame or Grammy nominations or stadium tours. It had become about remembering that music mattered because people mattered. The songs were just the vehicle. Saturday afternoon, Rebecca sat in her car outside Presbyterian Hospital, her phone in her hand, the HR director's number pulled up on the screen. She'd rehearsed the call a dozen times. Thank you so much for the opportunity, but after careful consideration, I've decided to decline the position. I'm pursuing other career options at this time. Professional, polite, utterly terrifying. She hit the call button before she could talk herself out of it. The conversation lasted 4 minutes. The HR director sounded surprised but cordial, wished her well, and that was that. 5 years of nursing, officially behind her, at least for now. Rebecca sat in the parking lot afterward, feeling oddly numb, waiting for panic or relief or anything definitive. Instead, she just felt light, like she'd set down a heavy bag she'd been carrying so long, she'd forgotten what her shoulders felt like without it. Her phone buzzed with a text from her mother. How'd the interview go? When do you start? Rebecca stared at the message, then typed, Didn't take the job. I'll explain tonight. Love you. She turned off her phone before her mother could respond. Across town, Daniel was packing. Not for a trip, for a move. He'd called his buddy in Montana that morning, and the conversation had been simple. Still got room for me? Always, brother. When you coming? Soon as I can get there. Now his apartment, which had always felt temporary despite a year of occupancy, was being systematically dismantled into boxes. He'd already given notice to his landlord, negotiated breaking his lease, and scheduled his VA appointments to transfer to the Montana system. The speed of it probably should have alarmed him, but instead, it felt like the first decisive action he'd taken since leaving the military. His therapist hadn't been thrilled. Running away from problems doesn't solve them, she'd warned during their emergency session that morning. I'm not running away, Daniel had argued. I'm running toward. There's a difference. And if the problems follow you, then at least I'll be dealing with them somewhere I can breathe. She'd made him promise to set up care immediately upon arriving in Montana, to maintain his medication schedule, and to check in with her weekly via video session. He'd agreed to all of it, recognizing that she cared, even if she didn't understand that sometimes the right move looked reckless from the outside. Evelyn spent Saturday morning at her kitchen table with her laptop, researching everything Reba had mentioned. Open mics, songwriters' rounds, small venues that featured new artists. She created a spreadsheet, her father's organizational influence showing through despite their current standoff, with venue names, contact information, submission requirements, and scheduled open mic nights. Her father walked through the kitchen twice without speaking to her, his disappointment radiating like heat. Her mother kept starting sentences and then stopping, clearly wanting to bridge the gap, but not knowing how. Finally, around noon, Evelyn's father sat down across from her. "Show me," he said. "Show you what?" Evelyn asked, defensive. "Show me your plan. If you're making this decision, I want to see that you're taking it seriously. Show me you've thought this through, beyond, 'I love music, and therefore it'll work out.'" It was more words than he'd spoken to her since she'd made her announcement. Evelyn turned her laptop around, showing him the spreadsheet, the list of venues, the schedule she'd created for writing, practicing, and performing. "I'm going to work at least 20 hours a week," she said, "between the bookstore and maybe picking up some tutoring jobs. That'll cover my phone, car insurance, and anything music-related. I'm going to gig at least twice a week, open mics count, and I'm setting a goal to book 3 paid performances by the end of August. I'm going to write at least 1 song a week and record rough demos of anything decent." Her father studied the screen, his lawyer's brain assessing the information. "This is more realistic than I expected," he admitted, "but 3 months of runway isn't much. What's your pivot plan if this doesn't work?" "Community college in the spring," Evelyn said. "Music business or audio engineering courses while I keep performing. If I'm going to do music, I want to understand the business side too. And if performing doesn't work out, there are other roles in the industry." Her father was quiet for a long moment. "I'm still not happy about this," he said finally. "I still think you're making it harder on yourself than it needs to be. But I can see you're approaching it seriously. That matters." It wasn't approval, but it was acknowledgement. Evelyn would take it. By 6 p.m., all 3 of them were converging on Broadway, drawn to their corner like it was magnetic north. Reba was already there, setting up, but something was different. She dressed more carefully today, still casual, still disguised, but with an intentionality that suggested this performance mattered more than the others. She'd brought a set list, written out in her own neat handwriting, songs she'd never performed in public before. Rebecca arrived first, carrying a paper bag. "I brought dinner," she announced. "Those food truck tacos from the place on 5th. Figured we could eat before you start playing." "You didn't have to do that," Reba said, but accepted the bag gratefully. "I know. I wanted to. Besides, I called HR this morning. I'm officially unemployed and celebrating terrible decisions." Her smile was bright and only slightly manic. "You did it," Reba said, impressed and concerned in equal measure. "How do you feel?" "Ask me again in 3 months when my savings run out," Rebecca joked, but there was real fear underneath the humor. "No, honestly, I feel like I jumped off a cliff, and I'm not sure if I'm flying or falling, but at least I'm moving." Daniel showed up at 6:15 p.m. carrying a guitar case. "I bought this today," he said, looking almost embarrassed. "Haven't played since high school, probably terrible at it. But I figured if I'm going to Montana to figure my shit out, I should have something to do besides stare at mountains." "That's wonderful," Reba said, genuine warmth in her voice. "You want to play something tonight?" "God, no. I need to relearn basic chords first, but I thought maybe you could show me a few things, if you've got time." "I've got time," Reba assured him. Evelyn arrived last at 6:25 p.m., her energy different from previous days, not deflated exactly, but sobered. "My dad talked to me today," she reported. "It wasn't great, but it wasn't terrible. He wants to see me succeed. He's just terrified I'm going to fail and blame him for not stopping me." "That's what parents do," Reba said. "They catastrophize because they love you. Doesn't mean they're right." They ate tacos together, sitting on the planter and the ground around it, talking and laughing like friends who'd known each other far longer than 4 days. Other street performers had claimed nearby spots, and the competing music created a chaotic soundscape that somehow worked. Very Nashville, very Broadway. At 7 p.m., Reba stood up, brushing taco crumbs from her jeans. "I need to tell you all something," she said, and the shift in her tone made them all pay attention. "Today's my last day doing this. I've got commitments starting Monday that I can't reschedule." The disappointment on their faces was immediate and unguarded. "But I wanted tonight to mean something," Reba continued quickly. "So, I'm going to play songs I've never performed before, songs I wrote that scared me too much to share, and I want you all to do the same, share something that scares you. For Daniel, maybe that's playing a chord on that new guitar. For Evelyn, maybe it's another original. For Rebecca, maybe it's telling us what you're really feeling. We're going to be brave together tonight." "That's terrifying," Rebecca said flatly. "Yep," Reba agreed, "that's the point." She played first, a song she'd written 6 months ago about feeling lost in her own success, about performing joy while feeling hollow. The lyrics were raw and vulnerable in ways that her radio hits never were, and singing them for an audience of 3 felt more exposing than a stadium tour. When she finished, the silence held weight. "That was beautiful," Evelyn said quietly, "and really sad. Are you okay?" "I'm getting there," Reba said honestly. "Writing it helped. Playing it helps more. Your turn." Evelyn played an original, different from the one she'd performed yesterday, this one about her fear that she was destroying her relationship with her parents over something she might fail at anyway. Her voice cracked on the bridge, but she pushed through. Daniel went next, his fingers clumsy on the new guitar, playing a halting version of a chore. Daniel went next, his fingers clumsy on the new guitar, playing a halting version of a chord progression he'd looked up on YouTube that afternoon. It wasn't pretty, and he stopped twice to reposition his fingers, but he made it through. "That was awful," he said, but he was smiling slightly. "That was brave," Reba corrected. "That's what matters." Rebecca went last, and she didn't perform anything musical. Instead, she talked, her voice shaking but determined. "I've spent 5 years defining myself by my job, by being useful, by being the person who helps. And I don't know who I am without that. I'm terrified that the answer is nobody. That I'm just empty without the purpose that nursing gave me. And I'm scared that I'm going to end up taking another job I don't want, because at least being miserable is familiar." The vulnerability silenced them all for a moment before Reba spoke. "You're not empty. You're just clearing space to figure out what you want to fill it with. That's not nothing. That's everything." They played together for the next 2 hours, the 4 of them creating something unrehearsed and imperfect, but entirely genuine. Tourists stopped and listened, dropping bills and coins into the guitar case. But the performance wasn't really for them. It was for the 4 people making the music, finding in the shared creation something each of them needed. At 9:30 p.m., as they were winding down, a young woman in her 20s approached with her phone out, recording. "Oh my God," she said, her voice rising with excitement. "You're Reba McEntire." The bubble burst. Reba froze, then slowly removed her sunglasses. In the streetlights and neon glow, without the barrier of the glasses and with the wig slightly askew from hours of wearing it, she was recognizable. Rebecca, Daniel, and Evelyn stared in stunned silence. "I knew it," the young woman continued, oblivious to the tension. "I've been watching for like 20 minutes, trying to figure out if it was really you. This is amazing. Can I get a picture?" "Not right now, honey," Reba said gently but firmly. "I'm sorry." The woman looked disappointed, but moved away, already typing on her phone, probably posting to social media. The moment she was gone, Reba turned to face the 3 people she'd been deceiving for 4 days. "I can explain," she started. "You're Reba McEntire." Evelyn said, her voice flat with shock. The Reba McEntire. Grammy-winning country music legend Reba McEntire. Yes, Reba admitted. I am. And you've been playing street corners in disguise, Rebecca continued, processing. For what? Research? A reality show? No, Reba said quickly. Nothing like that. I told you the truth. I needed to remember why I started. I needed to know if the music mattered without my name attached to it. This wasn't about deceiving you. It was about finding something real. We shared things with you, Daniel said, his voice tight with betrayal. Personal things. You knew who you were the whole time, but we were just street corner entertainment for you. That's not fair, Reba protested. Yes, I knew who I was, but I didn't know who you were, and I didn't know what this was going to become. You three, what we built here, that was real, that mattered. Of course it mattered to us, Evelyn shot back, angry tears in her eyes. You're Reba McEntire. You told me I had talent. Do you know what that meant? And now I'm finding out you were just some celebrity slumming it, playing street performer for kicks. That's not what this was, Reba insisted, but she could see she was losing them, watching the connection they'd built crumble under the weight of her fame. Everything I told you was true. I am lost. I do need to remember why music matters, and you three helped me find that, while lying to us about who you were, Rebecca said quietly. I get why you did it. I even understand the impulse. But it doesn't change the fact that we were honest with you, and you weren't honest with us. The silence that followed was brutal. Around them, Broadway continued its nightly chaos, oblivious to the small drama playing out on one corner. I'm sorry, Reba said finally, inadequately. You're right. I should have told you. I didn't because I was afraid if you knew, you'd treat me differently, and I needed you not to. I needed someone to just listen to the music and talk to me like I was human, not famous. But that wasn't fair to you. No, Daniel agreed. It wasn't. Evelyn grabbed her guitar case. I need to go. She looked at Reba, and the hurt in her expression was devastating. I believed you when you said my song had something worth developing. Now I don't know if you meant it or if you were just being nice because that's what famous people do with starstruck kids. I meant every word, Reba said desperately. Evelyn, you have real talent. That hasn't changed. But everything else has, Evelyn said, and walked away. Rebecca and Daniel followed moments later, leaving Reba alone on the corner with her guitar and a case full of money she suddenly didn't want. She packed up slowly, her hands shaking slightly, replaying the conversation and wishing she'd handled it differently. The young woman's recognition had been inevitable. She'd known that, had planned to tell them tonight anyway. But she'd wanted to control the reveal, to explain properly, and instead it had been taken out of her hands and turned into something ugly. Walking back to her apartment for the last time in disguise, Reba felt the weight of her fame settle back onto her shoulders like a familiar, suffocating coat. She'd had 4 days of freedom, 4 days of being just a musician with a guitar. And in those 4 days, she'd connected with 3 people in ways that felt more meaningful than most of her actual friendships. And now it was over, destroyed by the same fame she'd been trying to escape. Sunday morning arrived grey and drizzly, the kind of weather that matched Reba's mood perfectly. She'd slept poorly, her dreams full of Rebecca's quiet disappointment, Daniel's betrayal, and Evelyn's hurt. She kept reaching for her phone to text them, then remembering she didn't have their numbers. They'd been street corner friends, temporary and magical, and she'd ruined it. Her manager called at 9 a.m. You're trending on Twitter, he said without preamble. Someone posted video of you playing on Broadway last night. The internet is losing its mind in a mostly positive way. People think it's amazing that you were busking for fun. Good Morning America wants an interview. So does Kelly Clarkson. No, Reba said. No to which one? No to all of it. This wasn't a publicity stunt. and I'm not turning it into one. Reba, this is great press. I said no. She hung up before he could argue further. She spent Sunday in her apartment, avoiding social media and ignoring calls. By Monday morning, she had to face real life again, a recording session she couldn't cancel, meetings she'd already rescheduled once. She went through the motions, professionally but mechanically, her heart not in it. It took 3 days before she stopped checking her phone obsessively, hoping one of them would reach out. None of them did. On Thursday afternoon, a week after her street corner experiment ended, Reba was leaving her studio session when she saw Rebecca standing by her car. "How did you?" Reba started. "I'm not an idiot," Rebecca said. "You're Reba McEntire. Your manager's name is on your website. I called, said I was an old friend, and someone eventually told me you'd be here. I've been waiting for an hour." "I'm glad you did," Reba said carefully. "Rebecca, I'm so sorry." "Stop," Rebecca interrupted. "I didn't come here for an apology. I mean, the apology is nice and I accept it, but that's not why I'm here." She took a breath. "I came to say thank you." Reba blinked. "Thank you?" "You lied about who you were," Rebecca said. "And yeah, that hurt, but everything else you said was true, wasn't it? About finding yourself outside your job, about the difference between practical and scared, about clearing space to figure out what you want." "Yes," Reba confirmed, "all of that was true." "Then it doesn't matter that you're Reba McEntire," Rebecca said. "Or it matters differently than I thought, because a week ago I was drowning in a career that was killing me, and I didn't know how to let go. You helped me let go. Not because you're famous, but because you understood what it felt like to lose yourself in what you do. You'd been there, just at a different level." "Have you figured it out?" Reba asked. "What you want?" Rebecca smiled, and it was genuine. "Not entirely, but I've been volunteering at a youth center downtown, helping kids with homework and basic first aid training. No pressure, no trauma, just helping. And it feels good in a way the hospital never did. I don't know if it's a career yet, but it's a start." "That's wonderful," Reba said, and meant it. "Daniel left for Montana yesterday," Rebecca continued. "I drove him to the airport. He said to tell you that he understood why you did it, even if he didn't like it, and that the guitar you inspired him to buy is going with him." Relief flooded through Reba. "And Evelyn?" Rebecca's expression turned cautious. "Evelyn's hurt, really hurt. You're her hero, and finding out you were lying to her, it hit different than it hit me and Daniel. We're adults who've been disappointed before. For her, this was formative." "I know," Reba said quietly. "I've been trying to figure out how to fix it." "I don't know if you can," Rebecca said honestly, "but if you want to try, she's performing at the Bluebird Cafe next Wednesday, open mic night. She got on the list last week and has been terrified about it ever since." The Bluebird Cafe was legendary, one of Nashville's most respected venues for songwriters, intimate and unforgiving. For a 17-year-old with minimal performance experience, it would be terrifying. "I'll be there," Reba promised. "She doesn't know I'm telling you," Rebecca warned. "If you come, she might not react well. I'll take that risk." They talked for another 20 minutes, exchanging phone numbers this time, making tentative plans to meet for coffee. As Rebecca was leaving, she turned back. "For what it's worth, those 4 days mattered. They changed my life. I'm grateful for that, even with the complicated parts." "They changed mine too," Reba admitted. Wednesday evening found Reba back in disguise, though less thoroughly this time, just a baseball cap and minimal makeup, enough to avoid immediate recognition in the dim lighting of the Bluebird Cafe. She'd arrived early and claimed a seat in the back corner, her heart pounding with nervousness on Evelyn's behalf. The cafe filled quickly, the audience a mix of industry professionals, local songwriters, and music lovers who understood the privilege of hearing new talent in such an intimate space. Reba recognized several faces, producers, A&R reps, fellow artists also in low-key disguise. This was where careers could begin. Evelyn was the seventh performer of the night. She walked to the small stage area, looking terrified but determined. Her guitar clutched like a life preserver. She adjusted the microphone, and in the moment before she spoke, Reba saw her scan the crowd and stop when she reached Reba's corner. Their eyes met across the crowded room. Evelyn's expression flickered through surprise, anger, hurt, and something else before she looked away and addressed the audience. "Hi, I'm Evelyn Mitchell," she said, her voice steadier than Reba expected. "This song is called The Weight of Expectations. I wrote it about disappointing the people you love and learning to be okay with it." She played, and she was good. Better than she'd been on the street corner, polished by a week of intensive practice and driven by raw emotion. The lyrics had improved too. Less telling, more showing, painting pictures instead of stating feelings. The audience listened with the kind of attention that meant something, phones away, conversations silenced. When she finished, the applause was genuine and sustained. Evelyn looked stunned by the response, managing a shaky "thank you" before yielding the stage to the next performer. Reba waited until the open mic ended at 10 p.m., then made her way to where Evelyn was packing up her guitar, surrounded by several people offering compliments and business cards. "Can we talk?" Reba asked when the small crowd dispersed. Evelyn's jaw tightened. "I don't know what we have to talk about." "5 minutes," Reba pressed. "Please, then if you want me to leave, I'll leave." Evelyn studied her for a long moment, then nodded curtly. Outside, they stepped into the parking lot, the night air warm and thick with humidity. For several seconds, neither spoke. "You were incredible in there," Reba said finally. "I mean it. That song, your performance, your presence. You've got something real, Evelyn." "Don't," Evelyn said sharply. "Don't tell me I'm good when I can't trust if you mean it or if you're just being nice because you feel guilty." "I mean it," Reba insisted. "And I understand why you don't believe me. I lied to you about who I was, and that betrayal colors everything else. But Evelyn, I need you to understand something. I've heard thousands of aspiring musicians in my career. Most of them have talent. What separates the ones who make it from the ones who don't isn't usually skill. It's authenticity and drive. You have both." "You don't know me," Evelyn said, but some of the anger had leaked out of her voice, leaving just hurt. "You knew me for 4 days, and most of that was based on a lie." "I know what you showed me," Reba countered. "I know you were brave enough to stand up to your parents for what you believed in. I know you played your original songs for strangers, even though you were terrified. I know you took criticism seriously and worked to improve instead of getting defensive. Those things don't change because you found out I'm famous. But the advice you gave me about venues and showcases and building a repertoire, was that real? Or was it just famous person advice that doesn't actually apply to someone starting from nothing?" "It was real," Reba said firmly. "It's the same path I walked, the same path almost every musician in Nashville has walked. Fame doesn't come with a shortcut manual. We all start playing small venues and building from there. Every performer in the Bluebird tonight, including you, is walking the same road." Evelyn's eyes were bright with unshed tears. "I wanted to believe I could do this, and when you told me I could, it felt like permission. Then I found out you'd been lying, and I didn't know if anything you said was trustworthy. I felt stupid for believing you." "You're not stupid," Reba said gently. "I'm sorry I made you feel that way. I was trying to find something authentic in my own life, and I didn't think about how my deception would affect yours. That was selfish." "Yeah," Evelyn agreed. "It was." They stood in silence for a moment, the distant sounds of Broadway's nightlife carrying on the breeze. "Rebecca said you've been volunteering," Evelyn said finally, "that you're figuring things out." "Slowly," Reba confirmed. "Those 4 days on Broadway reminded me why music matters. Not the awards or the recognition, but the connection, the way it can make people feel less alone. I'd forgotten that. I'd let it become about everything else. And now I'm trying to remember it, to make choices based on the music instead of the machinery around it. It's harder than I expected. There's a lot of machinery, but I'm trying. Evelyn adjusted her guitar case on her shoulder. I don't know if we can be friends, she said slowly. The trust thing is hard for me. But I don't want to hate you either, so maybe we can be friendly acquaintances who occasionally talk about music. It wasn't forgiveness, but it was a door left open. Reba would take it. I'd like that. And for the record, Evelyn added, even though I'm still mad, those 4 days did matter. You helped me find the courage to do this. She gestured back at the Bluebird. So thank you. And screw you, but mostly thank you. Reba laughed, surprising herself. That's fair. I should go, Evelyn said. My dad's picking me up. We're in a weird place where he's supportive but worried, so he insists on driving me to and from performances until I prove I can handle the responsibility. It's annoying but kind of sweet. That's a dad for you, Reba agreed. As Evelyn walked away, she turned back once. Will you be at the next open mic? The one 2 weeks from now? Do you want me to be? Evelyn considered this. Yeah, I think I do. But sit in the back and don't tell anyone who you are. I need people to react to me, not to my connection to you. Deal, Reba promised. 2 months later, on a humid July evening, Reba stood backstage at the Ryman Auditorium, preparing for a concert that mattered more than most. It wasn't a tour stop or an award show. It was a benefit concert for veteran mental health services, something she'd organized specifically to honor Daniel and others like him. Rebecca was in the audience, having brought a group of teenagers from her youth center. Evelyn was also there, having earned a spot as one of the opening acts, a genuine booking based on her Bluebird performances, not celebrity favors, though Reba had made sure her manager heard the buzz about this talented newcomer. Daniel was in Montana and couldn't attend, but he'd sent a video message that would be played during the benefit portion of the evening. In it, he talked about his struggles with PTSD, the importance of accessible mental health care, and how music had become part of his healing process. He'd gotten better at guitar, he reported, and the quiet of Montana was helping in ways medication alone hadn't. As Reba walked onto the stage to thunderous applause, she carried her street corner guitar, the pawnshop Martin that had started everything. Her setlist included her hits, of course, but also the vulnerable song she'd played that last night on Broadway, the one about feeling lost in success. Before she played it, she told the audience a story. Not the whole story, not the names or specific details that would invade the privacy of 3 people who'd helped her find her way back to authenticity. But she talked about feeling disconnected from her music, about an experiment in stripping away fame to see if the songs still mattered, about 3 strangers who'd reminded her why she'd fallen in love with music in the first place. They taught me that music's power isn't in how many people hear it, she said into the microphone, her voice carrying through the historic venue. It's in how deeply it's heard. Sometimes an audience of 3 people who really listen matters more than a stadium of people who just know your name. She played the vulnerable song, and the audience, who'd come expecting hits and entertainment, listened with a quiet intensity that reminded her of those nights on Broadway. After the show, she found Rebecca and Evelyn backstage. You were amazing, Rebecca said, hugging her. Both of you, she added, turning to Evelyn. Your opening set was fantastic. I only forgot the lyrics once, Evelyn said, still buzzing with adrenaline. And I recovered pretty smoothly, so I'm calling it a win. It was a definite win, Reba confirmed. I heard some A&R people talking. You've got interest. I know. Evelyn's excitement was incandescent. Someone from Big Machine Records gave me their card and said to call about showcasing for them. Me showcasing for an actual label. Don't sign anything without a lawyer reading it first, Reba warned, sliding seamlessly into mentor mode. Even if it sounds perfect, get professional eyes on it. My dad's already on it, Evelyn assured her. Turns out having a tax attorney father is useful for music business contracts. We're actually bonding over reading fine print together. It's weird, but nice. The three of them talked for another hour, joined eventually by some of the teenagers from Rebecca's center who wanted photos and autographs. Reba obliged graciously, but what she enjoyed most was watching Rebecca with the kids, patient, encouraging, clearly having found a purpose that fulfilled her in ways nursing never had. As the evening wound down and people dispersed, Reba found herself alone on the Ryman stage for a moment. The house lights dim, the historic venue quiet. She thought about those 4 days on Broadway, about street corners and thunderstorms, about the 3 people who'd stopped to listen when they could have kept walking. She pulled out her phone and sent a text to the group chat the 3 of them had eventually created with her. Thank you for reminding me what matters. Checks cleared to the VA Mental Health Fund in honor of Daniel. 147, street corner earnings plus a bit extra. Seems right. Rebecca responded first. He's going to cry when he sees that. Evelyn added, that's perfect. Also, I'm playing the listening room next month. You're all invited. Daniel's response came last, the timestamp showing it was late in Montana. Thank you for all of it. I'm better, not fixed, but better. That's enough for now. Reba smiled at her phone, then tucked it away and walked off the stage. She had a life to get back to. Commitments and contracts, fame, and all the machinery that came with it. But now she carried something else too. The memory of being anonymous on a street corner, making music that mattered to 3 people who'd needed to hear it. And the knowledge that somewhere in Nashville, those 3 people were building lives based on authenticity and courage, taking risks because a stranger with a guitar had reminded them that passion mattered more than practicality. Except she hadn't been a stranger. She'd been Reba McEntire, country music legend, Grammy winner, stadium performer. And for 4 days, she'd also been just a musician with a guitar, learning from her audience as much as they'd learned from her. Both versions were true. Both versions mattered. And that, she thought, walking out of the Ryman into the Nashville night, was the lesson she'd needed most.